من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المأسومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah for the barakat of this Tuesday night and for the tawfiq to discuss and to learn from the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. We've been talking about the seerah of the Imams that we discuss and we mention in our Dua-e-Tawassul. And we've reached and come to the conclusion of our discussion tonight, inshallah, on the topic of discussing the life and the biography of our fifth Imam, Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We've talked about how Imam Baqir was the one who split apart knowledge, how Imam al-Baqir faced through many difficulties in his life, how he is one of the historians of the event of Karbala. One of the significances of this Imam's authority on this earth and time period on this earth and goals that he accomplished was re-establishing the tradition of the Prophet amongst the people. And we mentioned how, for example, many of the companions had died off, companions of our Holy Prophet and the Tabi'een, those who were associated with these companions had died off, and that our Imam was the one who took the opportunity to reintroduce and to bring the teachings of the Holy Prophet back in front of the people, such that when they wanted to learn about Islam, there was an authentic source that they could learn from. When we talk about the dawah of the fifth Imam and the sixth Imam, we talk about a period of relative independence from the government that allowed the Imam to be able to teach the religion of Islam. Now, it's important to understand something, that as we talk about these time periods, we can say that it was a time of peace and ease, but even peace and ease is relative to the circumstance of the time. So meaning that it's not to say that, for example, everything was convenient and everything was easy to go through. No, there were many challenges that the Imam still faced in the process of preaching and teaching the message of Islam, such that when we look at, for example, even the dawah of our fifth Imam, his shahadat is at the hands of those same khulafa that were supposedly making it easy for him to be able to preach the message of Islam. When we look at, for example, the khulafa in that dawah, in the imamat of our fifth Imam, there are some interesting characters and there are some interesting time periods that allowed for the events to take place that did. There are 5 contemporary khulafa during the dawah of Imam al-Baqir. Walid ibn Abdul Malik, who is the first of these during the Khilafah, during the Imamat of the Imam, the first Khalifa of these, he was someone who was very focused on external expansion and growth and development outside, and thus, therefore, it gave the Imam the opportunity to focus upon the internal development. Sulaiman bin Abdul Malik was someone who was more of a corrupt individual and was very much less competent, and therefore, again, the Imam had some freedom. The third of these is very famous, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. This was a person who became a Khalifa who was famous for his piety and good behavior, and restored some of the actual properties and the status and the dignity of Ahlul Bayt in the eyes of the people. Again, no Khalifa can ever give dignity to the Imam in the eyes of Allah, but amongst the people, he was someone who treated the Ahlul Bayt with good behavior. He attempted to restore the properties of Fadak. He had tried to treat the Ahlul Bayt well, tried to destroy the cursing of Imam Ali from the pulpits, and to honor the Ahlul Bayt the way that they deserve to be honored. His Khilafat only lasts for a period of about 3 years, until he's followed by a personality who is known by Yazid ibn Abdul Malik, who then goes on and reverts everything back to before Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And this Yazid ibn Abdul Malik is someone who, again, begins the atrocities against the Ahlul Bayt, takes back the properties given to them, takes back the honor and dignity in front of the people that was given to them. And again, the Imam went through more difficulties in this time period, until eventually the fifth of these khulafa is known as Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, his Khilafat lasts for a period of 20 years, and in complete agreement, the Shahadat of the Imam takes place during the Khilafat of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, And Hisham is that one who is considered to be the one who orchestrates, if not directly leads, the Shahada of Imam al-Baqir. This period of 19 years where the Imam was teaching and was working and helping the people and growing the teachings of Islam was in spite of the turmoil happening amongst the Banu Umayyah and the turnover that was happening amongst their khulafa and the infighting that was taking place amongst them. And it was these turmoil and infighting and expansion and plans that they had amongst themselves that separated the Imam long enough that it was seen that the Imam was not a threat to the political authority that these people wanted, such that they fought on the politics themselves, and the Imam worked for the religion of Islam, reintroducing the message of our Prophet to the people of the time. This reintroduction of the Prophet's message amongst the people of the time, there are two or three of these statements of the Imam, which are really fundamental and have had a great impact on me in my life, that I want to share with you as well, too, as sharing of some of the teachings from our fifth Imam, Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. They're very short, and again, there are many great long teachings from the Imam as well, too, but these are three that have had an impact on me, and I share them with you as some of the inheritance from our fifth Imam. The first of these is where our Imam makes a statement. He says, "Ma shayyiba shay'in bi-shay' ahsanu min hilm bil-ilm." This short and brief statement, the Imam says, nothing has been mixed with something else. There is no mixture of two things better than the mixing of clemency, hilm, with ilm, with knowledge. Hilm is to have forbearance, is to have clemency, that, for example, when knowing the right thing, to still be patient with someone who is wrong, to know the right thing and still treat someone well. This hilm and having forbearance in spite of being in a position of authority, power, knowledge, Imam makes a statement, there's nothing better that's paired with knowledge except for hilm, better than any mixture that exists on this earth. The profoundness of this statement is sometimes lost upon us. And why do I say that? Think about every time where you've known better than people around you, where you know what's right and you know when someone's wrong. How difficult and frustrating is it in that situation to have forbearance for someone who is ignorant? Many times the natural reaction is, I know better. You're a fool. You don't know anything. You're wasting our time. You're abusing us by the fact that your ignorance is polluting us. We're becoming, na'uzubillah, as people say, we're becoming more ignorant by listening to your words. But here the Imam is saying that truly knowledge, the beauty of knowledge is when it is paired with clemency and with patience, that one who doesn't know, how do we treat them? How do we behave with someone who doesn't know as well as we may know? And that's one of the most, that is the most beautiful mixture and companionship that you can have. So many times you may find yourself to pray for knowledge. And to pray for knowledge is a very good thing. Our sixth Imam would teach us that prayer for knowledge is an important element that every mu'min should pray for. Our Prophet taught us that talabul ilmun faridatun ala kulli mu'minin wa mu'minah, aw muslimin wa muslimah. Our Prophet would say that to search for knowledge is the obligation of every believing man and woman. But here the Imam is teaching that as you pray for this knowledge and you work towards this knowledge, join it and mix it with forbearance, to have patience with those who may not have your knowledge, who may not have the knowledge that you possess, to be patient with them, to be someone who forgoes their shortcomings because of the knowledge that you possess. Imagine that today Allah made us very, very knowledgeable, but we didn't have the hilm to be able to stay with our communities, with our families, and to be patient and to be forbearing with them, and to work through the fact that they don't possess that knowledge that we have. How difficult would life become? The second of these statements, that again is extremely profound and beneficial to us, the Imam makes a statement. He says, "Fi kulli qada Allah khayra lil mu'min." In every affair of Allah, or every dictate that Allah passes, is goodness for a believer. This belief should be something that each of us has established in our character firmly. It's indoctrinated into our personality, but one that sometimes we forget. The statement of the Imam is again reminding that Allah doesn't do anything to a believer except that it's good for him. Sometimes we go through sickness, sometimes we go through loss, sometimes we go through suffering, sometimes we go through the loss of loved ones, the loss of possession. And it can happen that we begin to doubt that, is Allah there? Is Allah punishing me? Here the Imam is saying that every difficulty, everything Allah does to you is good for you. And that acknowledgement that everything Allah does for you is good for you is one of the ways that when we have a deep understanding of who is Allah, why did He create us, we come to that realization that it's impossible for Allah to do anything but goodness to a believer. It may seem on its face in the moment that it is a bad thing, but in essence, it's a good thing that happens to us. The same way in life, there are many difficulties that we go through that are actually good for us. When you take a look at, for example, the process of getting a vaccination from a disease, that initial shot is bad, but what it's protecting you from is very good. The process of growth, where when we grow as a person, or we grow our muscles, or we grow our bones and growing up, can be painful as the body changes. But in the conclusion of that change is goodness for us, not badness for us. That's why in the moment it may seem that something is bad, but when I remember that everything Allah does to a believer is good, it reminds me and teaches me that no matter what I'm going through is thankfulness to Allah and appreciation for it. The third of these statements that is from one of the teachings of our Imam that has been profound and beneficial is a discussion where an Imam sees a person making a dua and he corrects his dua. يوما رجل عنده عند الإمام الباقر قال اللهم أغننا عن جميع خلقك. A man was near the Imam making dua, and he makes a dua. He says, "Oh Allah, make us independent of all of your creation, of all people." فقال Abu Ja'far. So Imam Baqir, hearing this, said to the man, لا تقول هكذا ولكن قل اللهم أغننا عن شرار خلقك فإن المؤمن لا يستغني عن أخيه. The Imam corrects this dua. The man makes a dua. He says, Allahumma aghnina min khalqik. Oh Allah, make us independent, make us free of need of your creation. One of the things that, for example, even Western culture teaches us to desire is independence, to be your own man, to be able to do your own things, to take care of yourself. Imam al-Baqir turns to this man, he says, don't make this dua. This is the wrong dua to make. And the Imam instead teaches him and says, instead make this dua. Allahumma aghnina an sharari khalq. Oh Allah, make us free of need of the evil ones of your creation, or the evil ones of people. Not all people, just the evil ones. And then the Imam elaborates, فَإِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ لَا يَسْتَغْنِي عَنْ أَخِيهِ. And the Imam elaborates and he says, a faithful believer cannot do without his brother, can never be free of need of his brother. This perspective is one that if we were all to adopt and understand, it would help us so much in the process of learning the idea that we as a community do need each other, and we need to work together, and that it'll never be a situation that as a believer, I'll be free of need of all of humanity. And thus, therefore, that shouldn't be what I'm trying to achieve. Instead, the process that I should be trying to achieve is acknowledging that, yes, we need each other. I need you and you need me. But we should only have need for those who are not the evil ones of Allah's creation, or who have decided to disregard Allah or not follow His commands. Because sometimes when we make the dua that, oh, Allah, make me free of need of anyone, it's a frustration then when I do need someone. And then when I do need someone, I look for the wrong kind of person for assistance. This statement of the Imam is profound for us in our time, in our world, because it reminds us that we should ask to need each other, those who are good and kind and love Allah, and that we should always acknowledge and realize being independent and alone is not the path of Islam. That's not what Allah wanted for us. Otherwise, that would have been an appropriate dua that the Imam wouldn't have stopped us from making. These, along with many other lessons, and which is why I only chose 3, though thousands upon thousands of lessons of the Ahlul Bayt are important for us, but from Imam al-Baqir, these 3, the pairing of knowledge and forbearance, ilm and hilm, that we should all try that as our knowledge increases, so does our forbearance. We should acknowledge and know that whatever Allah brings upon a person and brings upon us is only goodness. And that finally, that we'll never be free of need of each other, so therefore be free of need of the evil ones from amongst ourselves and rely upon the support of each other. Among the many lessons of the Imam, these were three that were important to share. Now, Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, who was the Khalifa at the time when Imam al-Baqir is martyred and poisoned, there is a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam explaining the final interaction between these two. That Hisham ibn Abdul Malik forces Imam al-Baqir to come from Medina to Sham. And he does it with evil intention to cause harm to the Imam. And when he does so, this happens after the event of Hajj. Hisham goes to Hajj with his family and his coterie, and Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq went to Hajj as well. At the event of Hajj, Hisham's brother notices that people have gathered around Imam Sadiq and Imam Baqir, and Imam Sadiq is speaking amongst the people and saying that certainly Allah has honored us with His Prophet and with His Quran and knowledge, and that we are above the others, that we are the source of guidance in humanity. Madmun al-Kalam. Hisham's brother goes back to Hisham ibn Abdul Malik and tells Hisham that Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq are telling the people their superiority over you and talking about their greatness over you. As a consequence, Hisham doesn't do anything in Makkah in front of the people. Instead, when he returns to Sham and Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq return to Medina, he calls for them. And he says, bring them to me in Sham. And then, in disrespect of the Imam, he calls him to Sham and then makes him wait for 3 days without speaking to him, without talking to him, without interacting with him, and keeps them in a condition of waiting that they could be summoned at any moment. So not meeting the Imam was not to say that, for example, the Imam came and he rested and he waited and then Hisham called. No, the Imam was called by the Khalifa. He has to now stand and wait for the Khalifa to interact with him. It was as if he was stuck in a waiting room for 3 days. And on the 4th day, he was called in to see the Khalifa. Imam Sadiq describes, and he says, when we entered into the throne room of the Khalifa, we found Hisham sitting on a throne with 2 rows of soldiers lined up in front of him. And we found that all the notables had gathered inside of the court. And an archery target was set up, and people were practicing archery in front of Hisham. When we entered amongst them, Hisham turned to my father, Imam al-Baqir, and he said, "Oh, Aba Ja'far, why don't you show us your archery skills?" Imam al-Baqir said, "I haven't done archery since I was a young man. Leave me from this. I'm an old man now. This isn't for me." Imam al-Baqir is in his 50s, if not 60s. Hisham insists, "Do it now." Imam al-Baqir says, "Leave me from this affair." Hisham insists, and he says, "No, Allah has blessed us with the mercy of the Quran and of the Prophet, so therefore we need to see this now." Hisham is recalling the statements of Imam Sadiq in Mecca and now taunting Imam al-Baqir with these statements. So Imam al-Baqir then, upon the insistence of the Khalifa, is forced to take the bow and arrow into his hands. And Imam al-Baqir shoots the first of these arrows. And Imam Sadiq says, by the miracle of Imamat, he hits the target exactly dead center. Then he takes the next arrow and he splits the first arrow down the middle in exactly the same location. And then he does the same with the third arrow, the fourth arrow, the fifth arrow, the sixth arrow, the seventh arrow, the eighth arrow. After the ninth arrow hits exactly dead center of the target, hits exactly the middle of the mark, one on top of another. Now Hisham says, "Stop." He says, "Stop." And he says, "Oh, Aba Ja'far, oh, Imam al-Baqir, you said you haven't done this, but you're an expert at this. So how long did it take you to learn to become such an expert? How long did it take for you to be possible to do this action?" Imam Baqir replies, he says, "Oh Hisham, in my youth, I did this for a few days to learn this skill. And then after that, I have not touched it until I picked up the bow today." And Hisham says, "Then how is it possible that you have such perfect aim and you have such amazing ability?" And Imam Baqir replies, and he says, "It is because of the mercy of Allah that He has made the progeny of the Prophet selected amongst all of humanity, that we are the ones that are the best of examples in society in all that we perform." Hearing the Imam describe his superiority over all people made Hisham angry to the point where he was thinking of, now, how shall I punish this one? And therefore, he sat in silence, furious, thinking about what he would do next. Imam Sadiq says, "In that moment, my father and I were standing in the middle of the court of this Khalifa until eventually I saw anger come upon the face, frustration come upon the face of my father." And he describes it, and he says, when Imam Baqir would become angry, the anger would become visible in his forehead and he would look up at the heavens. When Hisham eventually paid attention to Imam Baqir and saw this expression on his face of anger and frustration, Hisham immediately calmed down. And Imam Sadiq says, he took us up by the throne. He sat my father right next to him, and he sat me to the side of my father, and he sat us with him and began to talk to us. And the conversation is lengthy in the process of discussing and relating the attributes and the difference between the Prophet's progeny and Banu Umayyah. That as Imam Baqir would explain and talk about the superiority of the progeny of the Prophet, Hisham would turn and say, but we're both from the children of Abd Manaf. The Banu Umayyah and the Banu Hashim all come back to the same grandfather. So we're all the same. Whatever superiority you possess, I possess. And Imam Baqir would clarify and explain that no, we, the children of the Prophet, are different than you. In this way, the conversation continued for some time until Hisham realized that he was not going to solve this problem here. And the longer that this conversation carried on, the more difficult it was for him to stay in control of the discussion in front of all of these people present in his court. So he turns to and he says at the end of this conversation, "O Aba Ja'far, O Imam al-Baqir, ask me for anything you desire." Imam Baqir turns to him and he says, "O Hisham, my coming here has created insecurity in the hearts of my family and my children. Allow me to return home now, as quickly as you can." Hisham turns to him and he says, then I give you what you ask for. You are free to leave here now and you may return home as soon as you like. The narration says that at this moment, Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq left the court and were about to proceed home. Now, Sham was a place where many different types of people lived. Muslims, Christians, Jews, all these people in the Levant area that we talk about today. And sure enough, Imam Sadiq says that as we stepped out from this court of the Khalifa, we saw a large group of people, a procession of people proceeding through the street. And they were all Christian people proceeding through the street. He says, upon seeing this large procession of Christians in the streets, my father asked one of the people, "Who are these people? Where are they going?" And the man replied, he says, "These are the Christian priests and the elite. There exists the most knowledgeable Christian man who lives upon a mountain right outside of the city. And he allows the priests and the Christians to come to him one day out of the year to ask any question that they desire. So therefore, the elite of the Christians go up to ask him questions." Imam Sadiq says that my father covered his face so it would not be known of who he was, and he joined this procession with them and went up to the top of the mountain. Imam Sadiq describes and he says, the man that we met there was a very old man that had supposedly met the Hawariyun of Nabi Isa, the apostles of Nabi Isa, and he was so old that he used to tie his eyebrows up so he could see because his eyebrows had kind of come down over his eyes. In the middle of all of these people, that old man recognized Imam Baqir sitting amongst them. And he said, "Are you from amongst us or from that other nation?" Imam Baqir said, "From amongst that other nation." He says, "Are you amongst their scholars or are you amongst their ignorant ones?" Imam Baqir replied, I am not from amongst the ignorant ones. The man turns to Imam Baqir, this old Christian man. He says, do you want to ask me or shall I ask you? And Imam Baqir replies to him, he says, why don't you ask me? So the Christian man now turns to all the priests and the elite that are present there. He says, how unusual it is for one of them to be able to say to me that ask me. So he says, then fine, I will ask him. And he begins to ask questions to Imam al-Baqir. The first question he asks, he says, tell me, is there a time that is neither night or day? And Imam al-Baqir replies, yes, there is a time. He says, what time is that? He says, the time between Salat al-Fajr wa Tulu' al-Shams. The time between when Fajr sets in and the rising, and when the sunrise comes out and the sun comes out. The man says, what is this time? He says, this, Imam Baqir explains, he says, this is a time that Allah has made, that is the time of paradise, in which the asking of any person can be answered, that is neither in the control of the night nor in the control of the day. It is a time in which a person who is not at peace can find rest and can sleep in this time. And it is a time in which Allah loves to be worshipped, because this is a unique time in which communication with Him and the pious ones do not focus on the rest of themselves, but focus on the relationship with Allah. Now that old Christian man turns and asks him the second question. He says, let me ask you, how is it that in heaven there is the descriptions of eating food, but there's no description of going to the bathroom? How can it be that in heaven there is no bathroom, but there is a description of wonderful food to be eaten and enjoyed? Imam Baqir replies to him, he says, in the same way that when a child is in the womb of his mother, he consumes the nourishment from his mother, but there is no need for a restroom for him in that place, and there is nothing that he requires to expel on his own. The man became silent. He says, then tell me, when it comes to the fruit of heaven, there is a description that there will be so much and so plenty that it will never run out and it will never be reduced. How can that be possible when today we look at the world and we see that though there are many types of fruit, sometimes they increase, sometimes they decrease, sometimes there is sufficiency, sometimes there is insufficiency. Imam Baqir replies, he says, it's true that the fruit of heaven will never decrease. He says, to understand how the fruit of heaven operates, you must look at the example of the lamp of this world. That from one lamp you may light 1,000 lamps, and no flame is lost from the first lamp at all because of what it gives. In the same way in heaven, Allah will make it such that all fruit will benefit and never be reduced. The man, being astounded by these answers, he says, I shall ask you one question that is such a question that even you can't answer it. This is Imam Sadiq narrating about his father. So the man says, tell me about two sons of one man who were born on the same day, at the same time, from the same mother. They are twins, but yet one has a life of 50 years and one has a life of 150 years. How can this be possible? Imam al-Baqir replies and he says, you are talking about Nabiullah Uzair and his brother Uzar. Allah gave life to these two brothers at the same time, and they lived together for a period of 30 years. Then Allah took the soul of Uzair for 100 years and caused him to die. And after 100 years, Allah returned Uzair back to life when he joined his brother and stayed with his brother for another 20 years, at the end of which both Uzair and Uzar died on the same day at the same time. Hearing this, that old pious Christian man, in some narrations, became very upset and left the meeting and said to them, from now on, I will not answer your questions as long as he exists amongst you. Go to him for your questions. Do not come to me. And in other narrations, it narrates that the man came and became a Muslim himself at the hands of Imam al-Baqir. This piece of this narration is a discussion of one of the last conversations that the Imam had before when he returns to Medina and he is poisoned by the Khalifa or the representative of the Khalifa, and it causes the shahadat of the Imam. For 19 years, the Imam was a source of light and teaching inside of this world, where he was able to educate us on affairs and knowledge that was the splitting apart of knowledge. And it's our shortcoming that we haven't taken the time to invest in learning the statements of the Imam and invest in learning the knowledge of the Imam. And especially considering that we take honor and pride in the name of the fact that our Imam is Imam al-Baqir, the one who split apart knowledge, who gave us the essence of knowledge and information. Yet we haven't spent time with his knowledge and teaching. We ask Allah, by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadirin Ghaibin, ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. 10 times we call out, Ya Allah, 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 Ya Mahmud بحق محمد, Ya أعلى بحق علي, Ya فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة, Ya محسن بحق الحسن, Ya Qadim al-Ahsan bihaqq al-Hussain. Oh Allah, by the right of this night, by the right of this mention of Ahlul Bayt, by the right of our fifth Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir, by the right of all of the Ahlul Bayt, oh Allah, we ask that you forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, give us the tawfiq to increase in our knowledge and to be true followers of the messages of Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, we ask that those who are sick amongst our communities, khususan Sakina Shamsi and others who are going through sickness and disease at this time, that, oh Allah, give shafaat to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Remove the difficulties from the believers wherever they are. Keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. And entitle us to ziyarat of Ahlul Bayt in this world and the shafa of Ahlul Bayt in the hereafter. Remembering all of our marhameen, 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد